So here's a basic trig equation or trigonometric equation. I'll say trig equation is a bit shorter. So here's a basic trig equation: sine x equals 0.5. It's got a bit of trig stuff, sine there, and it's got an equals, which makes it an equation, and a trig ratio, which is basically a number. So sine x equals 0.5 is a basic trig equation. And the special thing about trig equations is that you can get infinite answers, because trig graphs go forever, go on infinitely. You can imagine a y equals sine x graph. It goes up and down infinitely, and it will cross the 0.5 mark on the y-axis infinite number of times, so which means you'll have infinite number of angles. X is an angle that will produce 0.5, i.e. sine of all sorts of angles will give you 0.5. And that's why every trig equation should have an inequality coming along with it. It will have that in an exam question. So the inequality says, don't give me infinite number of answers, that's just silly. Give me the answers that are between 0 and 360, for example. So that's the question introduced. Let's start answering it. First thing we've got to do is get a base angle. This base angle will generate all the answers that we need. And how do you get a base angle? Well, it's actually quite easy. You just inverse this number. So since I'm using sine, I inverse sine this number, and it gives me the base angle, which in this case is 30 degrees. But you have to be a little bit careful. Base angles have to be acute numbers. Acute angles, I should say. So acute angles are angles less than 90 degrees, between 0 and 90 degrees. And they have to be acute because they have to fit in one of these quadrants. A quadrant is means quarter. Quarter of what? Quarter of 360. So basically a quarter of 360 is 90, and so to fit into 90 it has to be an angle less than 90. And the way you make sure your base angle is less than 90 is that if you got a negative number here, just get rid of the minus sign, because if you inverse a negative number, you get an angle that is more than 90 degrees, and that's what you don't want. So if it said over here sine x equals minus 0.5, I'll just do inverse sine 0.5. I'll just get rid of the minus. That's a simple thing. If it said cos x equals minus 0.2, I'll do inverse cos 0.2, not minus 0.2. So that's a simple rule, and that'll give you an acute base angle. So I did inverse sine I did inverse sine 0.5. It was already positive, so keep it positive, and that gave me 30 degrees, which is my base angle. Now, how do I generate all the answers from that? Well, you use this quadrants business. Okay, I will go through this very slowly and explain it in all lots of detail, but I do advise you watch my video that introduces quadrants, because that way you understand a lot more about the background to the quadrants. For example, why is this quadrant the A quadrant? A means all of sine, cos and tan are positive there, only sine is positive there, tan is positive there only, and only cos is positive here, so i.e. tan and sine are negative here, right? But why is it that is so? Now I'm just going to tell you that this is the A quadrant, this is the S quadrant, T quadrant, C quadrant, and you've got to memorize that somehow. The old people like me, we've memorized it like this, or silly tomcats. That doesn't mean anything, so memorize it any way you like, but basically the quadrants start from this quadrant here, top right, and it starts with A, and then it goes to S, and then T, and then C. Originally I used all silly tomcats, and somehow that helped me, even though it doesn't mean anything. What does that mean? tomcats, whatever. I know what kind of a tomcat is, but still. Um, you know, you've got to memorize it somehow. There are different ways of doing it. None of the ways I know make much sense. So the first one is A, the next quadrant is S, the next one is T, and then C. Goes round like that. It should be done in that order. Don't go around the other way. This is 0, then it goes to 90, 180, 270, and 360. Going round like that. Okay, so that's a very quick introduction to what quadrants are, but that doesn't really explain what this positive negative stuff I was talking about is. I mean, like, why am I saying only sine is positive there? Basically, it's summarizing what you get in all the trig graphs, the sine, cos, and tan graphs, all in one diagram. So it's saying sine produces positive ratios in this quadrant and this quadrant. In the all quadrant, all of them, sine, cos, and tan, give positive ratios in the first quadrant, but only sine gives positive trig ratios. These are the trig ratios in this quadrant, which is between 90 and 180. Okay, and so on and so forth. So how does that help me solve this? How do the base angles work in it, in these quadrants? Well, first of all, you do this generic drawing with ASTC and also with these extra lines here, and they're not measured accurately at all. They're supposed to be generic. So I've got this base angle 30 degrees. I put 30 degrees without measuring if it's 30 or not. Even if it was 29, I don't know, 42, I would still draw it just in this rough way, drawing these two extra lines on top of these quadrant lines, the lines that separate the quadrants. I draw this line here, and I just mark this in as 30, but I don't put these arrows in yet. Okay, I just say that is 30, and this gap is 30 between this line and this line here is also 30. This between this line and this line is also 30. Between this line and that line is also 30. Okay, that's how you use the base angle, but that's not the full story. You'll see in a second. Now, I want to know simply where sine gives me positive numbers. This is a positive number. If it was a negative number, I'll be looking for in this quadrant, these quadrants where sine is negative, but it doesn't say negative number here, it says positive. So now in this question, I'm looking for where sine is positive, and I know sine is positive in this quadrant and in this quadrant here, the A and the S quadrant. So I'm going to start marking off angles that work out for this equation where sine is positive. So this one I can actually put a little angle mark in, because in fact, yes, this base angle is one of the answers. And then I go along to when I meet a line again, like this line here, and I go, okay, is this in the place where sine is positive? Yep, it is. So I'm going to mark this angle. But what is this angle? Well, I know from here, this is my 0 point. I go all the way across, and this would be 180. But I know this is also 30. So 180 minus 30 is where this line is. So 180 minus 30 is 150. So that is yet another angle where sine is positive. So what I'm saying is that sine 30 equals 0.5, and also sine 150 equals 0.5. Not minus 0.5, but 0.5. Now keep going, and I hit the line again, but this time I'm in the T quadrant and sine is not positive in the T quadrant. Then I keep going and I hit the line again, and I'm in the C quadrant, the cos quadrant, where only cos is positive but everything else is negative, including sine. So I don't want to use this quadrant either. Now by the time I get to here, I've met 360. I've gone from 0 all the way around to 360, and I'm not allowed any more answers. Okay, my quadrant says no more my inequalities say no more answers, so I gotta stop. And that's it. Those are the two answers I can use. that was a basic example of how to solve a trig equation. Now, I want to talk about very quickly what you should actually write down. You're not going to write down in the exam everything I've said, because what I'm saying is an explanation, not just how to get the answers and the marks in an exam. So what you actually do is you say, okay, base angle equals 30. Remember, base angle doesn't necessarily have to be one of the answers. And then I say x. X represents the answers. Okay, so x equals 30, because once I've done this quadrants business and I can say, okay, that's 30, good, that's in the first quadrant, it's one of my answers, great, because first quadrant sign is positive, so that's cool. Then I have to show some working out. How did I get 150? I simply did 180 take away 30, because that's what I actually did, right? Okay, right, this is where it meets the line in a place where sine is positive, so that's good. But what is this angle from here to there? It's 180 minus the base angle, which is 30. So 180 minus 30, then I write equals 30, and I simplify this, which is 150. And I put the degrees sign on. Before I didn't bother putting it on, you don't have to worry about it during the working out. It's just in the answers that it matters. And the other thing is that it looks a bit odd the way I'm giving the answers for x. I'm putting 30 degrees, comma, 150 degrees. I could have wrote x equals 30 degrees and x equals 150 degrees, but this is a standard way of giving the answers, and it's okay. So that's everything explained for a basic trig equation. Do check out my other videos to get a more complete picture of how to solve trig equations.